Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Catherine Mattice. I'm the founder and CEO of Civility Partners. No guests today. Today, we're going to talk about toxic workplace behaviors and how to protect yourself and your workplace. And that's because October is National Bullying Prevention Month. And of course, this all started with school age bullying, but has moved into just let's stop bullying each other, at least during the month of October. Just on that note, it's been interesting to watch the idea of workplace bullying kind of work its way through America's vernacular. When I first started 15 years ago, people didn't think about bullying at work. It was either harassment or you were just an asshole, and that was kind of the options. And so when I would talk about workplace bullying, people were kind of like, what are you talking about? And then school age bullying started really kind of taking off as a real issue in the media. We were seeing, unfortunately, a lot of suicides from high school kids or kids in general. Some laws were passed, and now virtually every state in the United States has a law related to the school's responsibility to address bullying among the children. And some states even were smart enough to add some adult bullying in their laws. But the school age bullying really allowed those of us talking about workplace bullying to kind of hitch our wagon and be able to create some information and create some buzz around workplace bullying. So I want to talk with you about workplace bullying as a social phenomenon, or any toxic behavior as a social phenomenon. A lot of times we really like to villainize the bully or anybody engaging in some toxic behavior. And sure, it's easy to, because we feel like they should know better. How do they not notice that they're creating havoc and that people feel upset interacting with them? But we're giving everybody too much credit. We're assuming that individual understands the impact of their behavior and doesn't care. And what I find is that that's not necessarily the case, but we'll talk more about that. Let's start with the roles that everybody plays. And that's the other piece, is we can certainly, if you want, villainize the person who's engaging in the toxic behavior, but that leaves out the idea that there are observers who are aware of this behavior and don't step in, that there are leaders who are aware of this behavior and don't step in, and that the organization itself is facilitating the ability for this behavior to happen in their context. So let's talk about that. There are different players. You have the targets who are at the receiving end of the toxic behavior. Those targets have counselors, and these are just sort of ad hoc, people that they reach out to. So maybe they have their best work buddy that they're complaining to. I know, when I went through workplace bullying 20 years ago, I spent a lot of time in another director's office venting about this behavior from another director who was engaging in bullying. And we spent a lot of time venting to each other. So we were each other's counselors, right? We were basically venting to each other, giving each other advice. And then, of course, the person engaging in toxic behavior also has counselors. So that person also has work buddies. People who engage in toxic behavior are often high performers. And so they've got allies, they've got people that they're talking to, and they may be going to their buddies and saying, oh my gosh, Catherine is so annoying, isn't she? She made another mistake, blah, 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 blah. And their counselors are feeding them and allowing them to vent. The toxic individual also has advocates and allies. Just to give you an example of that, when I go through the sales process to sell work coaching for leaders accused of engaging in bullying, what the narrative generally is that HR has been hearing about and taking in complaints for a long time, and HR has been talking to the individual about their behavior if they had the right kind of a relationship where HR can say, hey, executive VP, you got to be nicer. I keep hearing these complaints. And when they get the talking to the target or the toxic person, the talking to tends to calm them down for a few months, and then they kind of amp back up. HR has also been talking to the leaders about this toxic behavior from this individual, and the leaders are the advocates and allies. So the leader has essentially been ignoring HR and saying they're a high performer, so leave them be. It can't be that bad. Why can't everybody just get along? Everybody just needs to act like an adult. So the leaders are justifying and denying the behavior. So in that way, they are advocates and allies for the individual engaging in toxic behavior, because they're saying, leave it alone, kind of like, let's protect the toxic individual. So that makes me sad when I see that. And then the toxic individual also has reinforcers. Now, reinforcers are anybody who is aware of bad behavior but doesn't step in. And so this is actually a slide I use in my training programs. And this is always a really great kind of aha moment that I see in my training audience, where employees have been thinking all of this time, it's not about me, I'm not a target, or it happened to me once or twice, but I'm not going to get involved, where I see, person A really picking on person B. That's between them. It's none of my business. And that's not the case. If you're watching or observing bad behavior and you regularly choose not to get involved, then that makes you a reinforcer. You are not an innocent bystander. You're playing a role. You play a role in the bad behavior. So that is a key paradigm shift we need to make. And same for harassment. In harassment, the law requires that any supervisor or manager who's aware of harassment, take action, whether it's reporting that to HR or whatever the company's actions are. And witnesses of harassment are also in a hostile work environment. So we don't focus on just the target when we're talking about harassment. Employees have to recognize that even if it's not about you and you feel like it's between these two other people, if you're observing it, you are also a target of harassment, and you are also in a hostile work environment, and therefore you also have the ability to file a hostile work environment complaint. Same for bullying. You're being a reinforcer if you're not speaking up. And of course, all of this is happening in organizations' context. So the organization has something going on that is allowing this behavior to occur. Now, it certainly could be that the leaders are allowing it. It could be that the organization is too bureaucratic and the waters are too muddied for somebody to really feel safe in filing a complaint. It could be that somebody did file a complaint last year and it didn't go so well for them, so nobody else is filing a complaint. So again, we can't just focus on the toxic individual. We have to focus on the organization. What is the organization doing or not doing that allows this behavior to go on? So what we really need to focus on is turning all of those reinforcers in the workplace into advocates and allies. So that's where your bystander to upstander training comes in. That's a training we do a lot of. You have to send the message to your workforce that you want them to step in, and you have to give them the tools to do that. So it's super important for your workforce to recognize they have the right to protect their workplace and protect their culture. Now, if you are feeling bullied, I want to give you some tips. First, I know it's hard to feel this way or see it this way when you're at the receiving end of bad behavior, but recognize that this person, unless they're a complete psychopath, does care about you, and they have no idea that they're causing you so much damage. So I've been coaching these individuals for years, and these individuals engaging in workplace bullying are focused on getting results. They're focused on getting the job done. They're focused on perfection. And when they perceive that people are not perfect, not meeting their expectations, that they're too slow or making too many minor mistakes that it feels like, it's too much, whatever it is, they're reacting to that. And so when I coach these individuals, I interview 15 people who work with the individual, and then I'm able to show them that, hey, this isn't HR just asking you to be nicer. You are really causing some damage to the workplace. And they're often very appalled when they see all that data. So hopefully, as hard as it might be to recognize that they're not doing it because they're an evil person, they're doing it because they want results. Hopefully that eases things for you a little bit. And then the second thing you have to do is decide that you're not going to take this anymore. And then you get to create boundaries and hold fast to those boundaries. Now, I know this is easier said than done as well, but you can't control other people. You can only control your reaction to them. And again, I'm not saying this is easy where you could just be like, fine, I'm not going to put up with it anymore, and I'm just going to start pushing back. It doesn't work that way. It's a habit that you have to develop over time. And the way you respond to emails, the way you respond emotionally to this person over time, hopefully you can evolve and change. I'll just share another story. So we put together a book at the National Workplace Bullying Coalition. We put together a book of stories from people who essentially identified that within themselves that they had successfully navigated workplace bullying. And so we wanted to hear their stories and understand, what does successfully navigating workplace bullying look like? None of the stories were that I told HR and HR did an investigation and the person was disciplined or fired. It just doesn't work that way. What the stories were that, as they were these authors in our book, they told these stories that were kind of going downhill of like the bullying's getting worse and worse and worse. And they all sort of hit some sort of rock bottom, their own version of that. And from there, they were able to bounce back. And that's resilience. But they were able, there's in these stories, there's this arc of, and it's, I guess, an inverted arc of like the story gets worse and worse and worse. And then boom, they all made a decision not to allow this to control them anymore. And it meant different things for different people. For me personally, I was fired from my job where the bully was. And I decided on the way home that I was just never going to let that happen again. So it was the change in my mindset from, man, that the bully won, I got fired, to that's never going to happen to me again. And the power kicks on. For another person, she quit. There's her version is she like dropped her big bunch of keys. She's a facilities manager. She drops a big bunch of keys on her boss's desk and says, I'm done, and walks out. Another person decided she was going to stay at her workplace and fight the good fight for everybody else. So those are all different versions of when those decisions happened. But that's the key, is you have to make a decision. And then you get to set boundaries and hold true to those boundaries. So again, I recognize that is easier said than done, but I'm going to give you a tip. So setting boundaries means deciding within yourself that you're just not going to tolerate behaviors. And really think of it as an actual physical boundary. There's a fence around you, and you're not going to let people come through the gate unless they're going to treat you well. So some ways to push back, to push on those boundaries, are some examples on the screen there. So you could say something like, does it bother you to know that I feel like you're not listening? Or do you mind if I ask why you're sharing this? If someone's gossiping. When you say John's always late, you mean sometimes, right? So pushing back one version of that is to ask a question and help call their attention to the behavior, keeping in mind that they generally don't recognize the impact. I have come across probably a handful of people that I actually either had to fire or as clients, or just tell HR, this person's not getting it. Those people, this stuff doesn't work, but that's a minimal number in the years that I've been doing this. So you get to keep pushing back. If you get an email that, pushes on your boundaries, that's aggressive or accusatory, or maybe they've blamed you for something and CC'd other people to try to embarrass you, then you're going to, reply all to that email. And you're going to say, don't speak to me like that. If you'd like to talk about X, let's do it in your office, and just keep pushing back. And the more you push back, the more the individual will take notice, and everybody likes the path of least resistance. So they're not going to, over time, they're going to start to give up and let you be you and hold to your boundaries. Now, if you're an organizational representative listening in, some things to be thinking about to protect your organization from workplace bullying. One is to take a look at risk factors. I hate when PowerPoint does that. On one computer, it's fine. On another computer, it's not. The line behavior is off. Anyway, preventative measures include taking a look at all of the ways that organizations facilitate bad behaviors. And again, this is happening in the context of your organization. So this is not just about villainizing the individual. So I mentioned bureaucracy earlier. If your organization is big or there's a lot of rules and regulations, red tape, forms to be filled out, 12 levels of hierarchy, that type of thing is bureaucracy. And that creates an opportunity for bullying to occur, because you can use the tools of the organization to engage in bullying. You can use those forms. You can also hide more easily in a bureaucratic organization if you're a bully. The people at the receiving end of that bullying behavior, it makes it a lot more difficult to report it versus, if I'm in a 10-person company, I can walk straight over to whoever's managing the HR component and tell them this is how I'm feeling. But in higher ed, for example, in an organization, if I'm the receptionist in one of the colleges, I might have to go through several layers to get anybody to care or listen. So these are the kinds of things that you have to be thinking about. If your organization is bureaucratic, just to keep using that as an example, then how do you offset that, knowing that that can cause bullying? Well, maybe you need to make bullying and harassment complaint procedures a lot easier. There's a, just joke or a simple example, but, a red phone that you can call that bypasses everything if you're feeling bullied or harassed. If the organization is one of high stress, then how do you minimize stress? How can you help employees reduce their stress so they're reducing the opportunity to bully? So these are the things I'm talking about. Those are preventative measures. The second thing is always do a workforce survey. We always recommend that. I would absolutely run a survey if you're not. And these are just some examples of the kinds of statements that we ask when we run workforce surveys. And, we look at 5 different things, but just kind of wanted to put it out there. We're not necessarily, we do ask, we have a section around employee engagement. We also have a section around inclusivity, and that's where some of these things come from. So the first statement there, I would talk to my coworker if I felt something, was inappropriate. If you have a lot of people disagreeing with that statement, then that means you're lacking psychological safety, and that means there's room for bullying and other things to occur. Once you've done your survey, you need to develop action items, and we like to develop those action items with an action team. So once we do a workforce survey, We work with the organization through some strategic planning to really dissect the data, figure out where the kind of low-hanging fruit is, where's the maximum impact going to occur, what kind of budget do they have to make changes. So really figuring out, what do we do now that we have the data? We like to use an action team rather than doing that just with the leaders, because we want the organization to have buy-in. So our action teams are made up of various people from various levels and various departments and various genders and all the things. We like to have around 8 people on the action team, and then we're able to create buy-in because we're getting information from everybody, not just the leaders. Just to give you an example of some of the types of things that are on the action plan after a survey is, so for example, we're often doing a lot of training after a workforce survey to solve some of the problems or influence solutions to some of those problems. And then we're also looking at the organization. Again, this is an organizational problem. The organization has to take accountability for their role. And so we do things like turning company core values into core competencies so that everybody's measured on their ability to engage in a respectful, positive work environment. We look at, hey, who do you promote? Who are your organizational kind of champions? Who do you celebrate here? And are those people bullying? Because if they are, maybe we need to not promote them until we know that they're more well-behaved. And then lastly, of course, we're working with leadership and helping leadership get in the habit of communicating a lot about the kind of culture they want, the kind of behavior that they won't tolerate, and that sort of thing. So these are the types of things that are on an action plan. And then we're also turning core values into job competencies. So I just want to talk you through that. Even if you don't do a survey, you can certainly do this. So for example, we worked with the chili hot dog chain, and the chili hot dog chain they already had a pretty great culture. They just wanted to solidify it. So we helped them come up with 3 core values: service, quality, and fun. And then we turn those core values into core competencies. So for example, fun being one of the core competencies. How do you measure people on being fun? Well, they're always perceived to be in a good mood. They laugh, they engage with people, they're smiling. So this is a great core competency. It's observable, and managers can then measure their team on whether or not they're living the core value. And then if somebody is engaging in bullying, for example, then that violates this core competency, right? So if I have a gossip on my team and I'm doing my quarterly performance evaluation, then I can talk with this team member to say, look, gossip is not fun. It's fun for no one. And it's really the opposite of enjoying others and engaging with peers. You're spreading rumors or gossiping about people. That's the opposite of what this core competency is about. So I'm going to give you a lower score on this competency, and then we can work to address it. So just like anything else, I'm just thinking about, Taco Bell, the cashiers have to be good at cash. That's a core competency. Their drawers have to be correct at the end of their shift. So that's a core competency. And I don't know this, but I'm assuming on Taco Bell's performance review, there's a whole section around competency with money for those cashiers. And so this is no different. You can make this tangible. This behavior can be very tangible. And then, of course, lastly, you do need to hold as an organization everybody accountable. So you need to make sure that people leaders have a good understanding of how to set expectations, how to manage bad behavior like incivility or bullying, that they understand their role is to coach not only performance of employees, but their behavior as well. That they're creating a positive workplace regularly, that they have the tools to do that they're creating psychological safety. And we really want everybody to have a lot of these other skills there under the everyone box, but being an upstander, an ally is a key component of that people need to have the tools to step up and hold each other accountable. So another thing, obviously, if you do have a bully on your team, you need to hold them accountable. And so this is an example of a script that you can use to do that, where you're focused on complaints about perceptions of interactions. So you're not going to say, you yelled yesterday. You're going to say there was a perception that you were yelling yesterday. And of course, they're going to say, nah, that's not what happened. I didn't yell. That's their fault. And you're going to say, assuming you weren't there, you say, oh, I don't know. But I do know that several people felt like you were yelling. That was their perception. And so that perception is a little concerning, and we need to adjust that perception. We need to make sure that people aren't perceiving you as a yeller. So then you can engage in some coaching. Well, what could you do differently so that it's not being perceived as yelling? And they might say, you know what, I just have a really loud voice. It's deep. It's got a lot of resonance. I can't help it if it comes across that way. Okay, maybe you're not yelling, but it sounds like, because people perceive it that way, that you've got to be really aware of talking in a lower or a quieter voice, so you can help them find some ways to avoid those perceptions. All right. Well, if you've watched this whole thing, then there's your SHRM activity ID. I so appreciate you taking a look and learning a little bit about workplace bullying in Workplace Bullying Prevention Month. So again, there's your activity ID. And if you want to email me at info@civilitypartners.com, my team will send you these 3 things. One is a core competency matrix. One is a healthy workplace policy that you can look at implementing in your own corporate policy. And then we'll also send you an abrasive leader assessment, so you can kind of check the box and recognize how little or how much somebody is engaging in workplace bullying. So thank you again. I'm going to put this back up for you. I appreciate you listening in, and have a great rest of your week and month, etc. Oh, wait, I see a question. Hold on. Oh, I see several questions. I had my slides up. Let me go through these. Hen says, this is an important topic I've been waiting for. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. You know what? I'm realizing StreamYard did me wrong, because they're showing 0 viewers. Okay, favoritism. Why say anything? Nothing will be done. Yeah, I mean, if you have a manager that is a favorite of the boss and you try to talk to them about it, and the boss is kind of, hey, that's the boss's favorite, then certainly that is an issue, and you have to consider the pros and cons, the consequences of stepping in and saying something. And I'm sorry if that's what's going on. And sometimes the response is, you just have to decide, I'm not willing to put up with this, and I'm going to go get another job. Again, I know easier said than done, but it's important to have your boundaries. Oh, it looks like you guys were having some frozen problems. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see. I have come across this in many companies, and at the very least, I try to apply it to myself. However, the issue lies with those who have the authority to enforce it and prevent such behaviors. How can I convince someone with more authority than me to take this matter seriously? That's a great question, Hend, and I appreciate it. I would say an important component is showing data. So actually, if you email me for let me move this slide. If you email me and we can send you this abrasive leader assessment, I think this is a really great way to just kind of logically, quantitatively, if you will, say, these are the behaviors that I see. And, so I don't know how well you can see what's on this little picture of the document, but something like frequently raises their voice, they're overly critical, they dominate conflicts. It creates an ability for you to just really kind of quantify what the problems are. So something like that might be useful. And then also really quantifying the cost of the behavior. So if you could say, hey, I'm aware that X, Y, and Z, those 3 people all quit because they didn't enjoy working with this person. I know that I've spent a lot of time dealing with this. If you can help present a business case for the cost of this behavior, that's going to be super helpful as well. Okay. Yes, you're happy. We're happy to, well, the recording, in terms of the recording, Lynette, it just sits here on this page, so it'll be there forever. All right, let's see. How do you handle competencies like fun and addressing employee mental health that's not related to bullying? I am so glad you asked that, Helen, because sometimes I read that fun competency and I think, I wonder when somebody's going to ask me about mental health, because maybe I am not fun because I'm depressed, and that is a whole nother conversation. So I'm glad somebody finally did. You're the first person to ask me. I think that, like with any competency, you have to think of accommodation. So just kind of using the Taco Bell cashier as an example, because we've all had a cashier. We've all come across cashiers in our life. A cashier has to be good at managing money. Their drawer has to, be correct at the end of the day. Well, what if I have an issue that, what if I have a learning disability, or I have ADD, so I can't, the money count, maybe I can't count it correctly at the end, or maybe I do make a mistake in counting. So even in something like that, the organization has to accommodate. So I think with something like fun, you could say this is a competency that everyone here has to have, but also recognizing that some of us have a bad day. Maybe I have a bad week. Maybe I'm going through some horrible personal problem and it's keeping me from laughing and enjoying people. And that's okay. So I'm certainly not here to say anybody who's depressed or having a rough time shouldn't work there because they're not meeting the competency. Just like anything, it's about training your managers to have open, vulnerable conversations with people. So I hope that answers your question. How do you use the activity ID? If you're a SHRM certified person, you can use the activity ID to keep your credential. What do you do when the bullies are HR? Ooh, good question. And that's another problem. So I have had that question before, and I think that you get to decide what you want to do. If you feel like you could go above HR and talk to the CEO or the owner, for example, then you should do that. And you should get other people to do it with you, so that there's several of you saying, look, we think you've got the wrong HR person here. This person is a bully, and here are the ways in which they are a bully. So there's power in numbers. If you feel like I would never do that, and I don't think anybody else would ever do it with me, then again, you have to make that decision. And when I was talking about making that decision, the woman who dropped the keys on the desk, that was her decision. And again, totally recognize this isn't a flippant, like, well, just get another job, what's wrong? But to consider that as a very real option is what I could say. You get to have your boundaries, period, end of story. And if somebody is crossing them, then you have to decide what to do with that. But again, I would absolutely see if you can get other people to go with you to talk to whomever HR reports to, and talk with them about this person's behaviors. All right, so I don't see any more questions. I'm so thankful for all of you joining. Again, this recording will sit here evergreen, so you can refer to it anytime. I'll make sure my team emails out the link to you as well, so that you have it. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, evening, month, year, and we'll see you next time.